Hello, and welcome to another video from the YouTube channel, From Religion to Agnostic. Ashkenaz in the Hebrew Bible is one of the descendants of Noah. Ashkenaz is the first son of Gomer, and a Japhetic patriarch in the Table of Nations. In rabbinic literature, the kingdom of Ashkenaz was first associated with the Scythian region, then later with the Slavic territories, and, from the 11th century onwards, with Germany and northern Europe. His name is related to the Assyrian Askuza, Iskuze, a people who expelled the Cimmerians from the Armenian highland of the upper Euphrates area. Medieval Jews associated the term with the geographical area centered on the Rhineland of western Germany. As a result, the Jewish culture that developed in that area came to be called Ashkenazi, the only form of the term in use today. In the genealogies of the Hebrew Bible, Ashkenaz was a descendant of Noah. He was the first son of Gomer and brother of Japheth and Togarmah, Genesis 10:3, 1 Chronicles 1:6, with Gomer being the grandson of Noah through Japheth. According to Jeremiah 51:27, a kingdom of Ashkenaz was to be called together with Ararat and Minni against Babylon, which reads, "Set ye up a standard in the land, blow the trumpet among the nations, prepare the nations against her, i.e. Babylon, call together against her the kingdoms of Ararat, Minni, and Ashkenaz, appoint a captain against her, cause the horses to come up as the rough caterpillars." According to the Encyclopedia Biblica, Ashkenaz must have been one of the migratory peoples which in the time of Esarhaddon, burst upon the northern provinces of Asia Minor, and upon Armenia. One branch of this great migration appears to have reached Lake Urumia, for in the revolt which Esarhaddon chastised, the Manna, who lived to the southwest of that lake, sought the help of Ispakai of the land of Askuza, a name, originally perhaps Iskunza, which the skepticism of Dillman need not hinder us from identifying with Ashkenaz, and from considering as that of a horde from the north, of Indo-Germanic origin, which settled on the south of Lake Urumia. Okay, and as I always do when researching, a few things stuck out to me, that needs further research. For instance, and I quote, according to Jeremiah 51:27, a kingdom of Ashkenaz was to be called together with Ararat and Minni against Babylon. What sticks out to me, probably from recent research I did earlier in the genealogy or elsewhere, was since talking about Ashkenaz, we should look at the Ashkenazi Jews. Ashkenazi Jews, also known as Ashkenazic Jews, or, by using the Hebrew plural suffix, im, Ashkenazim, are a Jewish diaspora population who coalesced in the Holy Roman Empire around the end of the first millennium. The traditional diasporal language of Ashkenazi Jews is Yiddish, a Germanic language with elements of Hebrew, Aramaic, and Slavic languages, developed after they had moved into northern Europe, beginning with Germany and France in the Middle Ages. For centuries they used Hebrew only as a sacred language, until the revival of Hebrew as a common language in 20th century's Israel. Throughout their time in Europe, Ashkenazim have made many important contributions to its philosophy, scholarship, literature, art, music, and science. The term, Ashkenazi, refers to Jewish settlers who established communities along the Rhine River in western Germany and in northern France dating to the Middle Ages. Once there, they adapted traditions carried from Babylon, the Holy Land, and the western Mediterranean to their new environment. The Ashkenazi religious rite developed in cities such as Mainz, Worms, and Troyes. The eminent French Rishon Rabbi Shlomo Itzhaki, Rashi, would have a significant influence on the Jewish religion. In the late Middle Ages, due to religious persecution, the majority of the Ashkenazi population shifted steadily eastward, moving out of the Holy Roman Empire into the area's later part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, comprising parts of present-day Belarus, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Poland, Russia, Slovakia, and Ukraine. In the course of the late 18th and 19th centuries, those Jews who remained in or returned to the German lands generated a cultural reorientation, under the influence of the Haskalah and the struggle for emancipation, as well as the intellectual and cultural ferment in urban centers. They gradually abandoned the use of Yiddish and adopted German, while developing new forms of Jewish religious life and cultural identity. The Holocaust of the Second World War decimated the Ashkenazim, affecting almost every Jewish family. It is estimated that in the 11th century Ashkenazi Jews composed 3% of the world's total Jewish population, while an estimate made in 1930, near the population's peak, had them as 92% of the world's Jews. Immediately prior to the Holocaust, the number of Jews in the world stood at approximately 16.7 million. Statistical figures vary for the contemporary demography of Ashkenazi Jews, ranging from 10 million to 11.2 million. Sergio della Pergola, in a rough calculation of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews, implies that Ashkenazi Jews make up 65 to 70% of Jews worldwide. Other estimates place Ashkenazi Jews as making up about 75% of Jews worldwide. Genetic studies on Ashkenazim researching both their paternal and maternal lineages, as well as autosomal DNA indicate that Ashkenazim are of mixed Levantine and European, mainly Western to Southern European, ancestry. These studies have arrived at diverging conclusions regarding both the degree and the sources of their European admixture, with some focusing on the extent of the European genetic origin observed in Ashkenazi maternal lineages, which is in contrast to the predominant Middle Eastern genetic origin observed in Ashkenazi paternal lineages. The name Ashkenazi derives from the biblical figure of Ashkenaz, the first son of Gomer, son of Japhet, son of Noah, and a Japhetic patriarch in the Table of Nations, Genesis 10. The name of Gomer has often been linked to the ethnonym Cimmerians. Biblical Ashkenaz is usually derived from Assyrian Askuza, cuneiform Askuzae or Iskuzae, a people who expelled the Cimmerians from the Armenian area of the upper Euphrates. The name Askuza is usually associated with the name of the Scythians. The intrusive N in the biblical name is likely due to a scribal error confusing a vav with a nun. In Jeremiah 51:27, Ashkenaz figures as one of three kingdoms in the far north, the others being Minni and Ararat, perhaps corresponding to Euryto, called on by God to resist Babylon. In the Yuma tractate of the Babylonian Talmud, the name Gomer is rendered as Germania, which elsewhere in rabbinical literature was identified with Germanicia in northwestern Syria, but later became associated with Germania. Ashkenaz is linked to Skanza and or Skanzia, viewed as the cradle of Germanic tribes, as early as a 6th century gloss to the Historia Ecclesiastica of Eusebius. In the 10th century history of Armenia of Yofannes Draz Kanakertsai, 1.15, Ashkenaz was associated with Armenia, as it was occasionally in Jewish usage, where its denotation extended at times to Adiabani, Hazaria, Crimea and areas to the east. His contemporary Saadia Jaon identified Ashkenaz with the Sikulaba or Slavic territories, and such usage covered also the lands of tribes neighboring the Slavs and Eastern and Central Europe. In modern times, Samuel Kraus identified the biblical Ashkenaz with Hazaria. Sometime in the early medieval period, the Jews of Central and Eastern Europe came to be called by this term. Conforming to the custom of designating areas of Jewish settlement with biblical names, Spain was denominated Sepharad, Obadiah 20, France was called Tsarfat, 1 Kings 17:9, and Bohemia was called the land of Canaan. By the High Medieval period, Talmudic commentators like Rashi began to use Ashkenaz and or Eretz Ashkenaz to designate Germany, earlier known as Lothar, where, especially in the Rhineland communities of Speyer, Worms, and Mainz, the most important Jewish communities arose. Rashi uses Leshon Ashkenaz, Ashkenazi language, to describe German speech, and Byzantium and Syrian Jewish letters referred to the Crusaders as Ashkenazim. Given the close links between the Jewish communities of France and Germany following the Carolingian unification, the term Ashkenazi came to refer to the Jews of both medieval Germany and France. And as always, I leave links in the description box for those wanting to research further, as you should. And now also, the second thing that stuck out to me, probably because like the Wall of Istar, this, Minni, also comes up a lot. So thought it would be good to include this as well for Ashkenaz video. Let's look at the biblical Hebrew, Minni. The Mannaeans, country name usually Mania, Akkadion, Manna, biblical Hebrew Minni, were an ancient people who lived in the territory of present-day northwestern Iran south of Lake Urmia, around the 10th to 7th centuries BC. At that time they were neighbors of the empires of Assyria and Euryto, as well as other small buffer states between the two, such as Musasir and Zikirta. The name of Mania and its earliest recorded ruler Adaki were first mentioned in an inscription from the 30th year of the rule of Shalmaneser III, 828 BC. The Assyrians usually called Manna the land of the Mannites, Manash, while the Urartians called it the land of Manna. Describing the march of Salmanassar III in the 16th year, 843 BC, it was reported that the king reached the land of Munna, occupying the interior of Zamua. However, the chronicle does not mention any march or taxation on the state of Manna. It is possible that the Assyrians either failed to conquer Manna, or advanced only to the border of Manna, and then changed course and marched on the neighboring country of Al Arabia. In the Bible, Jeremiah 51:27, Mannaea is called Minni. The Jewish Encyclopedia, 1906, identified Minni with Armenia. According to the Peshitta and Targum Onkelos, the Minni of the Bible, Jeremiah 51:27, is Armenia, or rather a part of that country, as Ararat is also mentioned, Isaiah 37:38, 2 Kings 19:37, as a part of Armenia. However, it can also relate to one of the regions of ancient Armenia, such as Mannaeans, Minnias. Together with Ararat and Ashkenaz, this is probably the same Minni from the Assyrian inscriptions, corresponding to Mannaea. The name, Armenia, has been theorized by some scholars as possibly deriving from Har Minni, meaning the mountains of Minni. According to examinations of the place and personal names found in Assyrian and Urartian texts, the Mannaeans, or at least their rulers, spoke a non-Semitic and non-Indo-European language related to Urartian, with no modern language connections. Okay, so there are many other things here that I could point out to further one's research, but for the sake of time and because I want you to use your brain and do your own research, links will be as always below. Happy researching! So let's return to Ashkenaz. In rabbinic literature, the kingdom of Ashkenaz was first associated with the Scythian region, then later with the Slavic territories, and from the 11th century onwards, with northern Europe and Germany. The region of Ashkenaz was centered on the Rhineland and the Palatinate, notably Worms and Speyer, in what is now the westernmost part of Germany. Its geographic extent did not coincide with the German Christian principalities of the time, and it included northern France. How the name of Ashkenaz came to be associated in the rabbinic literature with the Rhineland is a subject of speculation. In rabbinic literature from the 11th century, Ashkenaz was considered the ruler of a kingdom in the north and of the northern and Germanic people. Sometime in the post-biblical early medieval period, the Jews of Central and South Central Europe came to be called by the name Ashkenazim, in conformity with the custom of designating areas of Jewish settlement with biblical names, Spain being identified as Sepharad, Obadiah 1:20, France as Tsarfat, 1 Kings 17:9, and Bohemia as land of Canaan. By the High Medieval period, Talmudic commentators like Rashi began to use Ashkenaz and or Eretz Ashkenaz to designate Germany, earlier known as Lothar, where, especially in the Rhineland communities of Speyer, Worms, and Mainz, the most important Jewish communities arose. Rashi uses Leshon Ashkenaz, Ashkenazi language, to describe the German language, and Byzantium and Syrian Jewish letters referred to the Crusaders as Ashkenazim. Given the close links between the Jewish communities of France and Germany following the Carolingian unification, the term Ashkenazi came to refer to both the Jews of medieval Germany and France. Ashkenazi Jewish culture later spread in the 16th century into Eastern Europe, where their rite replaced that of existing Jewish communities whom some scholars believe to have been larger in demographics than the Ashkenazi Jews themselves, and then to all parts of the world with the migrations of Jews who identified as Ashkenazi Jews. Ashkenaz in the Armenian tradition. In Armenian tradition, Ashkenaz, along with Togarma, was considered among the ancestors of the Armenians. Koryoan, the earliest Armenian historian, calls the Armenians an Ashkenazan, i.e., Ashkenazi, nation. He starts the Life of Mashtats with these words: I had been thinking of the God-given alphabet of the Ashkenazi nation and of the land of Armenia, when, in what time, and through what kind of man that new divine gift had been bestowed. Later Armenian authors concur with this. Hoveyans Drask Hanakertsi, 10th century, writes: The sixth son was Tiras, from whom were born our very own Ashkenaz and Togarma Argam, who named the country that he possessed Thrace after himself, as well as Chittim Idim, who brought under his sway the Macedonians. The sons of Tiras were Ashkenaz, from whom descended the Sarmatians, Rephath, whence the Soramatians Soramatk, and Togarma, who according to Jeremiah subjugated the Ashkenazian army and called it the house of Togarma, for at first Ashkenaz had named our people after himself in accord with the law of seniority, as we shall explain in its proper place. Because of this tradition, Ashkenaz is a male given name still used today by Armenians. Lastly we have Ashkenaz in German royal genealogy. In 1498, a monk named Agno de Viterbo published fragments known as Pseudo-Barosus, now considered a forgery, claiming that Babylonian records had shown that Noah had more sons than the 3 sons of his listed in the Bible. Specifically, Tuiscin or Tuisto is given as the 4th son of Noah, who had been the first ruler of Scythia and Germany following the dispersion of peoples, with him being succeeded by his son Munus as the 2nd king. Later historians, e.g. Johannes Aventinus and Johann Hubner, managed to furnish numerous further details, including the assertion by James Anderson in the early 18th century that this Tuiscin was in fact none other than the biblical Ashkenaz, son of Gomer. James Anderson's 1732-tome Royal Genealogies reports a significant number of antiquarian or mythographic traditions regarding Ashkenaz as the first king of ancient Germany, for example the following entry. Ashkenaz, or Ashkenaz, called by Aventinus Tuisco the Giant, and by others Tuisto or Tuizo, whom Aventinus makes the 4th son of Noah, and that he was born after the flood, but without authority, was sent by Noah into Europe, after the flood 131 years, with 20 captains, and made a settlement near the Tannas, on the west coast of the Euxine Sea, by some called Askin from him, and there founded the kingdom of the Germans and the Sarmatians, when Ashkenaz himself was 24 years old, for he lived above 200 years, and reigned 176. In the Votiables of Saxony and Hesse, there are some villages of the name Ashkenaz, and from him the Jews call the Germans Ashkenaz, but in the Saxonic and Italian, they are called Tuis Cones, from Tuisco his other name. In the 25th year of his reign, he partitioned the kingdom into toparchies, tetrarchies, and governments, and brought colonies from diverse parts to increase it. He built the city Duisburg, made a body of laws in verse, and invented letters, which Cadmos later imitated, for the Greek and High Dutch are alike in many words. The 20 captains or dukes that came with Ashkenaz are, Sarmata, from whom Sarmatia, Dacus, or Danus Dania or Denmark, Geta from whom the Geti, Gotha from whom the Goths, Tibuscus, people on the river Tibuscus, Mosia, Mysia, Phrygus, or Brigus, Phrygia, Thenus Bithynia, Dalmata, Dalmatia, Jader, Jadericolonia, Albanus from whom Albania, Zavis, the river Save, Panis, Pannonia, Salon, the town Sale, Uzalus, the Ezeli, Hister, Istria, Agilis, Dietas, Ibalus people that of old dwelt between the rivers Enos and Rhinus, Epirus, from whom Epirus. Ashkenaz had a brother called Scytha, say the Germans, the father of the Scythians, for which the Germans have of old been called Scythians too, very justly, for they came mostly from old Scythia, and Germany had several ancient names, for that part next to the Euxine was called Scythia, and the country of the Gets, but the parts east of the Vistula or Wasel were called Sarmatia Europea, and westward it was called Gallia. Celtica, Alemannia, Francia, and Teutonia, for Old Germany comprehended the greater part of Europe, and those called Gauls were all Old Germans, who by ancient authors were called Celts, Gauls, and Galatians, which is confirmed by the historians Strabo and Aventinus, and by Alcidius in his chronology, page 201 etc. Ashkenaz, or Tuisco, after his death, was worshipped as the ambassador and interpreter of the gods, and from thence called the first German Mercury, from Tuitseben to interpret. In the 19th century, the German theologian August Wilhelm Nobel again equated Ashkenaz with the Germans, deriving the name of the Aesir from Ashkenaz. Alrighty, and that will do it for this video. Catch you on the next one. Have a great day, and be safe. If you enjoyed this video, please think about subscribing, as well as hitting the like and sharing would help out a lot. Thank you all, peace out, people.